Hello, everybody. Before Rabbi Shneeweiss gets started, for those of you who are here or joining us in Zoom land, thank you for coming. Today's shiur has been dedicated memory of my mother, who passed away day before Yom Kippur. The reason why we're doing this shiur and why we're having Rabbi Shneeweiss give this shiur, or the connection to Rabbi Shneeweiss, is that during the past year, while my mother was fighting her illness, she spent a lot of time with me and my family, and I was blessed to be able to connect with her with some learning. I remember in the evenings I was trying to think of some way to interact and have a common enjoyment other than the television show. And Rebbe suggested, maybe try learning with her. It's a little, doubtful that maybe, a yeshiva level shiur would be of interest. But with God blessing, the first shiur that we listened to together was from Rabbi Shneeweiss, one of his wonderful Tehillim shiurim. And the shiur was actually regarding, it was a parak that we say for atonement every day, or every day, but twice a week. And my mother found the ideas so incredibly moving. And that in turn, I found incredibly moving, because I'm not going to get into the details of that parak right now, but just very briefly, it describes David Hamel's anguish and his suffering from circumstances and crying out to Hashem, and his expressing the most sort of desperate but pure human expressions of, in my death, how can I possibly be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim? How can I possibly serve you? And that's the real reason to fight, to continue to live and to exist. And that's really a key purpose, and that's what matters. And to this day, I'm blessed that whenever I say atonement, I can't help but think about his ideas and have them be very, very real in ways that, thank God, I can't personally directly relate to, and I hope I never can. But ultimately, Rabbi Shneeweiss' shiur and his delivery and his compassion and his insights and his clarity, and his self-deprecation too, there you go. Really, really moved my mother. It made learning something which was clearly a very raw subject and very personal to her. She was able to learn it with a smile, and she was able to take away from it. And not only that, but it inspired her to continuously ask me to bring in the Torah that I was listening to enjoy it with her. And she, throughout the year, thank God, we got to enjoy it together. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience. So this shiur is going to be exploring the contours, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but of the appropriate limits and ideas of being mizaka others, whether they're in their lifetime or posthumously. It seems like a pretty appropriate topic, and I raised it with Rabbi Shneeweiss earlier. And I look forward to hearing the ideas and the approach. And any kaparas nishkava for my mother. And without further ado, here's Rabbi Shneeweiss. Thank you.
Alrighty, so let me just set this up here. Let's mute Paul again. And okay, so title this year, the title this year is Vicarious Merit in the Framework of the Rambam Ikkarim. And as Dani mentioned, this is in loving memory of Zisi Kuznicki, Zissel Gittel Bas Moshe, aliyah Shalom. We're going to start with a preface about how the shiur came to be and certain methodological insights and disclaimers that come from this. Okay, so as Dani mentioned, then he proposed this topic. And this is excerpt from our WhatsApp conversation. He said he would like to have a series, of shiurim on the nature/immortality of the soul, Olam Haba, and Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. As an intro to the series, I would like the first year to cover the concept of being mizakeh others, meaning to give other people merit, both while they are alive and after they pass away. So my reaction was, that was my reaction. I didn't tell him that, but my actual response, and this is what I want to kind of talk about just as a methodological intro here. I said, regarding the topics of the nature/immortality of the soul and Olam Haba, the world to come, I must admit that the more Torah I learn, the less I feel I know about these weighty topics. And I'm not just saying that facetiously. I mean that my personal understanding of these topics has literally become less and less clear and more filled with problems the more I learn. Okay, even to the point where, like, when he asked me this earlier, I was like worried at the half-life of my knowledge that by the time we actually got to this year, I would think I know nothing about these topics. Thankfully, we didn't get to that point, but that's I'm not exaggerating here, especially because I've come to realize the extent to which the writings of the Rishonim in these areas are based on Aristotelian ideas, which are either outdated, incomprehensible to me, or both. Okay, so these are weighty topics, and I don't feel qualified to give shiur on this, okay, which is why I had to kind of like bargain Dani down on what the shiur would be about and what the scope would be, okay? So I wanted to talk about what the non-objective is of the shiur and then what the actual objectives are. So this is not going to be a comprehensive, authoritative treatment of the topics that we mentioned, okay? It's not comprehensive in the fact that, as you can tell by the title, this is just going to be within the Rambam's framework, okay? We're not going to go into any other Rishonim except insofar as they are foils to the Rambam or shed light on the Rambam, okay? There are many other Rishonim out there, and in fact, we'll talk about why in a second, why we're focusing on the Rambam. But then I had to figure out what the objectives of the shiur are, okay? And I was trying to come up with an analogy for how to approach topics like this, which would be of use for me in conveying to you the scope of the shiur, but also of use to you in terms of when you approach these topics in your own learning, okay? So I don't know if this is a pre-existing mashal, but I came up with this, the jigsaw puzzle mashal, okay? So learning about Yesodei Torah, fundamentals of Torah, for me is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle with some important qualifications. Number one, you don't know what the final image is supposed to look like, which makes a puzzle very hard to do. Okay, number two, you don't know whether you have access to all the pieces. Either you don't know whether you yourself have access or whether, like, we as a Jewish people, you know, in the Masorah, in the oral tradition, have access to these pieces. Three, there are lots of other pieces from other puzzles mixed in. Okay, so you don't even know if the pieces that you're trying to put together are from the right puzzle. And four, whenever you complete one part of the puzzle, you realize that the final image that you're going for is larger and more complex than you thought. So this is my experience with, you know, in pretty much in any area of a Torah fundamental, especially in these three areas, and especially in the area of what the soul is and how the soul gains immortality. It's just like this jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so the objective of the shiur, I decided, is going to be this. You know, Dani said half jokingly right before, you know, any sodos, any like secret esoteric ideas, you know, or any fiducian. So no, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my current jigsaw puzzle, my jigsaw puzzle understanding of the Rambam's view on four ideas. Okay, and I'm going to give you the jigsaw puzzle. It could be that it is incomplete. It could be that it's wrong, but it's where I'm at right now. And I figure I've got nothing to lose because either you point out flaws and errors in my reasoning and we all learn together, or you gain from what we see here and we all build together. Okay. But there are four notions that the shiur is going to touch upon, okay? And these are common phrases when people talk about the deceased. One is ilui or aliyah for the neshama, okay? Ilui nishmas, people say for the elevation of the soul. Two, zechus, in merit of, okay? How to merit someone who is has deceased. Three, zecher, zichrono livracha, right, in memory of. And four is kapara, is in atonement for, okay? And there's an asterisk here because I got to give a shout out to Rabbi Natan Slifkin's essay, What Can One Do for Someone Who Has Passed Away? And if you read that essay, so when I started preparing for this year, I found this essay. I was hoping that there wouldn't be overlap. Turns out there's almost zero overlap. But if you are looking for the type of shiur that Dani wanted, which is on like how everyone approaches these topics, read that essay, and he basically will go through various opinions and he provides lots of good sources. I just used his same organizational scheme because he also talks about what these four terms are and what they mean. I'm just limiting this to Rambam, okay, as opposed to other Rishonim and Mefarshim. Okay, now why Rambam, right? So there was a Shavuot shiur, I don't remember what year, sometime in the 2000s, when someone in the shiur asked Rabbi Chait, you know, Rabbi Chait was giving an idea, and someone asked, well, the Rambam says, and he was kind of pestering him with the Rambam, and Rabbi Chait said, not everything is the Rambam. Okay, now there was a rumor going around in yeshiva afterward, this is on Shavuos, and so it wasn't recorded. There's a rumor that, no, he didn't say not everything is the Rambam. He said, tie a knot, pause. Everything is the Rambam. Okay, now that was not an actual rumor, but the joke is that I think in this yeshiva especially, then we tend to focus heavily on the Rambam for a number of reasons. But I just wanted to state explicitly that I think Rabbi Chait's point in that shiur, and this is a no-brainer, but again, emotionally, we have to remind ourselves of this, that there are many other great thinkers who disagree with the Rambam, especially on these topics. Okay, the Rambam did not have a monopoly on the truth. And if you want a comprehensive treatment of how the Rambam, how others would disagree with everything in this shiur, with much in this shiur, then I'd say go to the Shar HaGemul of the Ramban. Okay, and what I'm secretly hoping is that, well, I guess it's not secret anymore, but I'm hoping that Rabbi Zimmer, or someone else who has a keen interest in the Ramban will give a follow-up shiur on the Ramban's view on all these topics. Okay, that's just not where I'm going. So why Rambam? So I'm giving the shiur focusing on the Rambam for 3 reasons. One is, this is literally the only view that I'm fluent enough to give shiur on. Okay, I just don't know the other views. And compared with that is something else. Okay, there is in the Drushos Haran, there's on the 10th drasha, he is explaining punishment and olam haba and reward. So he gets to this part where he's trying to explain how punishments work in the afterlife. Okay, and he sets it up really nicely. He says that if you look at the Torah's punishments in this world, whether they're punishments of the court or whether they're punishments of God, then all punishments are instructive or educational in nature, that they are designed to correct the flaws or the sins of those who warranted the punishments. So he explains that in this world. Okay, then he talks about in the world to come, and he runs into a bunch of problems, which we're going to discuss. I'm not going to spoil it. But he quotes a bunch of statements of Chazal about how the soul is purified after death, okay? And he kind of ends up thinking himself into a corner because he explains the principles about, he sets it up such that punishment makes sense when the person can do teshuvah, when they can change. But then in olam haba, you can't really do teshuvah. So he concludes his paragraph with this phrase here. He says, but the nature of how this cleansing and purification occur there in olam haba is something hidden from our eyes. If we were to open our mouths to speculate based on our own theories and the indications of Chazal's statements, he says, nihye kecholmin, we would be like dreamers. Okay, that's like borrowing a phrase from Shir HaMalos. V'lachein yoser tov lishtok mimenu, and therefore it's better to shut up about it. Okay, better to be silent about it. And this phrase resonated with me because I did try to prepare other Rishonim. I tried to go into the Shar HaGemul, I tried to go into the Sefer Ikkarim, I tried to go into the Rashba, and every time I looked at the views that were alternatives to the Rambam, I felt like I'm a dreamer, which means I felt like I'm just using my imagination without any basis in actual concepts because I don't understand the concepts. And what ends up happening is the more you delve into these areas and you're not ready for it, the more you just end up attaching reality to your own speculations in your imagination. And that's harmful, which is why he says, therefore, it's better to be silent about it. So in addition to the fact that the Rambam is the only view that I'm fluent enough to give a shiur on, I think it would be detrimental if I even tried to give shiur on the other opinions because I just don't know. And I encourage you to really, read the Shar HaGemul. Okay, we have the English translation in Yeshiva by Chevelle. It is completely different. He talks about how, the souls of the tzaddikim, the souls of the Rishaim, get burned into ashes, which are under the feet of the tzaddikim in Gan Eden. I just feel like I'm in dreamland when I'm talking about these topics because I'm sure there are ideas there. These are all from Chazal. I just don't know what he's talking about, okay? So I think it's important when going to these topics to recognize what you're capable of and what you're not, and when you go into the realm of imagination and when you're in the realm of things you can understand. So that's another reason I'm focusing on the Rambam. And then the third reason is, me, I like focusing in all the Torah I teach on practical application. So I can testify that these views and the ideas we talk about today, when understood properly, will have a positive impact on our day-to-day practice of Judaism, at least in my experience and the experience of the students who I've taught this to in the past. So that's another reason why I want to focus on this, whereas the other ideas are valuable, but if I have not had the same experience, I feel like they're just theoretical things that this is what happens after you die, whereas with the Rambams, we can translate these into actual things that change the way that we live. Okay, just to go over the structure of the shiur. So of these 4 notions, the primary focus of the shiur will be on giving the neshama an aliyah, making the soul be elevated, and on zechus, on merit. Secondary focus will be on zichrono livracha, on the phrase of blessed memory. And then I realized, this morning, Dani texted me asking if I was going to cover this this topic of kapara. And I said, I don't know. I think really kapara is such a big topic, it warrants its own shiur. And then an hour ago, I found a new source on this. So I'm going to give you just a little bit about kapara, but I'm really not going to touch that concept so much. Okay. Also, one more warning here. So there's a Rosh Yeshiva who said, dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy, okay? I think that this applies not only to decisions, but also to topics, okay? And the one who expressed this the best is, I listened to a shiur recently by Rabbi Joshua Maroof. It was a shiur he gave about the girl Liel who was killed in a car accident on Peninsula. So the shiur is called "In the Hands of Heaven: Hashem's Role in Tragedy." And I'm just going to quote his words because this is how Rabbi Maroof. The shiur was about how to handle tragedy like this, and so Rabbi Maroof just put this really well. And so I just want to quote his words. He says, "When it comes to the most difficult questions in life, the answers that are the most appealing and that are the most satisfying are not necessarily the answers that are true. Therefore, we have to be careful that if an answer seems to be just too good and just too perfect and just too satisfying, there might be something about it that is less authentic, because reality and truth is often more challenging and more messy than we'd like it to be. So if something just seems to fit like a glove and seems to give us a perfect sense of satisfaction, that should make us worry that maybe we're missing something." Okay, that's half the quote. I just want to interject for a second. I tell my students this when I'm teaching Eov, about why bad things happen to good people and vice versa. I usually begin the course in high school by asking students like what answers they've heard, and usually there are these answers like, oh, like there's reincarnation and these people are being punished for past sins. And I tell them something that I learned from Rabbi Chait, which was, if you ever hear an answer that is simple to a deep question, it has to be false. You just know it has to be false. And the way I say it with Eov is there wouldn't need to be a book that's 42 chapters long that deals with a question that Chazal say Moshe Rabbeinu asked when he talked to God, if the answer could be given over in one sentence. So these are not simple. So it's actually a litmus test for the truth of an idea in a fundamental topic, that if it is simple and satisfying, it's not true. Okay, and Rabbi Maroof went on to say, a true answer is probably not going to give us the kind of satisfaction that an imaginary answer would give. An imaginary answer would be tailored to make us feel good and to make us walk away from a situation which is indescribably painful and truly terrible, with a feeling that everything makes sense now and we're able to handle it and we're able to understand it and we're able to explain it. And I don't think we're ever going to reach that point. Okay, so in a topic like this, which is a sensitive topic about what happens to the soul after death and what we can or can't do for the souls of the deceased, then I think it is important to be aware of this tendency within ourselves to be looking for comfort and for security in the answers. And again, that is starting down the path of the imagination. And we just have to be on guard against that. And that, if we get to the end of the shiur and there are questions or there are problems or there are answers that are either intellectually or emotionally not satisfying, that's not necessarily an indication that they are false. It could be an indication that they're true, but it is definitely an indication that more investigation is needed, either investigation of the topics or investigation self-knowledge of where is this reaction coming from in me. And I also think, I'm thankful to Dani for giving me the opportunity to do the shiur, but also I know that since Dani is asking this question, then he wants straight answers, so I'm not going to hold back here. A few last miscellaneous disclaimers. So after I gave my last Sunday shiur, someone gave me feedback. You can say whether this is helpful or not. He said, I already knew the main point of your shiur. Great. Okay, so evidently that shiur was not for you, right? So this shiur is specifically intended for an even broader audience because we are all at different points in our understanding of the foundations. I think there was talk a couple of years ago in one of the first Sunday shiurim about how Rabbi Chait gave a lot of fundamental shiurim in the early days of yeshiva, and those tapes are still available. And if you listen to those tapes, then you get it from the best presentation possible. But I feel like it is very beneficial to go over and review fundamental ideas again and again. And so for many of you, this is going to be a review of fundamental ideas. For some of you, it's going to be primarily review, but you'll see new insights here or there. And maybe there will be some new insights entirely for other people. Okay, this is not a shiur with secrets or chidushim. This is just trying to answer the question that we set out to answer. Okay, and because of the fundamental nature of the shiur, and because I didn't know who was going to be here, I just wanted to remind you, you can feel free to interrupt with questions, insights, and corrections. Like if you think I'm just totally wrong, I don't have an MPhD. MPhD I made up a doctorate in metaphysics. I'm not a metaphysician. Okay, so I'm just going based on what the Rambam is saying and my poor understanding of it. As is my case in these shiurim, I'm going to be reading from the English unless I want to highlight the Hebrew. All the Hebrew text is from the most authoritative manuscripts in the Rambam. PowerPoint slides don't reflect the Rambam's paragraph divisions, and the Hebrew translations are from Rambam's Arabic. Sorry, the Hebrew translations of Rambam's Arabic works are from Kafaf, and the English translations are my own. So without further ado, let's go to the first topic, Le'ilui Nishmas, okay, Rambam on Le'ilui Nishmas, on elevating the soul. And this is where we're going to recap the Rambam's view of the afterlife. Okay, so the question we're going to set out to answer here is simple. What would the Rambam hold about the phrase Le'ilui Nishmas? And again, you hear this all the time when people give shiurim or do mitzvos for someone who's deceased. They say, Le'ilui Nishmas, so-and-so, for the sake of the elevation of the soul of such and such. Now, the reason why I say, what would the Rambam hold, is because I haven't asked the Rambam, but also the phrase was not in existence in the time of the Rambam. In fact, I suspected that this phrase was a later phrase, but I did not know just how late, okay? And this is the one point I'm gonna quote from Rabbi Slifkin's essay. So footnote, he says, the earliest source for this notion of an aliyah for the neshama appears to be the work of Sukkot Shalom, published in 1883 by Rabbi Yisrael Guttmacher of Greiditz, which innovates a complicated combination of arguments in order to explain the mechanism via which this works. A contemporary work that seeks to present this notion, published by Judaica Press 2009, entitled The Neshama Should Have an Aliyah, okay, that's what the book is about, that's the title of the book, is only able to quote Rabbi Guttmacher and later rabbinic authorities in support of it, which is astonishing to me that this phrase is so ubiquitous now, yet no one used this phrase before 1883. And just to get a frame of reference, 1883, I just Googled, what happened in 1883, Benito Mussolini was born. So this phrase is not even as old as Benito Mussolini, So it's just a very, very new phrase, and yet somehow it took off like wildfire, probably because it is very appealing. So we're not going to find any place where the Rambam explicitly addresses this, but we're going to have to look at his works and see if we can infer what he would hold about this phrase. Okay, so let's start with the basics. In the Rambam's 13 Ikkarim, which are the 13 fundamentals of Torah, which he speaks in, I'm going to mute this person. Okay. Yeah. All right. So he has the 13 fundamental principles of Judaism. So he says the 11th fundamental principle is that he, Hashem, may he be exalted, rewards with good those who fulfill the commandments of the Torah and punishes those who transgress its admonitions, and that the ultimate reward is Olam Haba, the world to come, and the ultimate punishment is kares, spiritual excision. And we have already spoken about this concept in a sufficient manner. Now, the Rambam states his 13 principles at the end of his introduction to Perek Chelek, the bulk of which is about reward and punishment in the afterlife. Now, again, this is a large topic, and we could go on at length of this. Again, I'm trying to keep my eye on the ball here and just focus on the concept as much as we need to answer the questions. So we're going to move, instead of reading the whole essay of the Rambam, we're going to go to Hilchos Tshuva, where the Rambam has a more concise summary. He says, this is in Tshuva Perek Ches, in the 8th chapter of Hilchos Tshuva in the Mishnah Torah. The ultimate goodness which is hidden away for tzaddikim is the world to come. This is the life which has no death with it, and the good which has no bad. This is what is written in the Torah, so that it will be good for you and will prolong your days. From the oral Torah we learn, so that it will be good for you, refers to the world which is entirely good, and you will prolong your days, refers to the world which is entirely long, and this is the world to come. The recompense for the righteous, schar hatzadikim, the recompense, I think, is a better word than reward, okay, for reasons that the Rambam explains in Avos. Just, I guess, a quick thing there. Rambam in Pirkei Avos, I didn't include this in the thing. He says, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, Al tiyu ka'avadim hamshamshim esarav almanas l'kabel pras, ela hevu ka'avadim hamshamshim esarav almanas shelo l'kabel pras. You should not be like servants who serve their master to receive a pras, but you should be like servants who serve their master with the intent to not receive a pras. So pras is usually translated as reward, but in his commentary on that Mishnah, the Rambam says there's a difference between pras and schar. Pras is something that you give to somebody which is not owed and which is unconnected to the thing that they're doing. So for example, he says, if you ask like your kid to like take out the garbage and then you give them like $1, that would be a pras. And it's related, I think this is actual etymology, to the word prize. Okay, so that's pras. Schar, he says, is nikba b'chova. It is established based on law or on a lawful principle. So recompense, I think, is a better translation here. And I think when people do think of reward in Olam Haba, they do think of it as a prize. I think everyone at some point in their life has the notion of like points, like it's a point system, and like you do stuff and you get points, like you redeem the points for like a giant stuffed elephant, but just a metaphysical elephant in Olam Haba. But the Rambam says schar, which is something that there's an actual real world cause and effect relationship between. Okay. But then he says like that, so the recompense for the righteous is to merit this pleasantness and to be in this state of goodness. The retribution for the wicked is to not merit this life, but to be cut off and to die. All those who don't merit this life in the world to come are the dead who do not live forever, but are cut off in their wickedness and die like an animal. Okay, so let's summarize here, okay? Ultimate reward is Olam Haba, which we're going to define in a second. Ultimate punishment is the loss of Olam Haba or Kares. Now, when we read that, I don't know if any of you had this like heart palpitation, okay? But people in the Rambam's time did, okay? In fact, this was one of the reasons why they banned or wanted to burn the Rambam's books, or actually burn the Rambam's books, okay? Because you notice, or I don't know if you notice, because it's more of what the Rambam is not saying. What is missing from here? What is missing? Gehenom. Okay, so the Rambam does not mention any Gehenom, okay, which we're gonna, I guess, the most accurate translation of Gehenom is purgatory, okay, not hell. Hell is a Christian thing. Nor does he mention any concept of a positive punishment after death, meaning the soul experiences punishment, okay? And there is and in fact, in the Rambam's writings, there's only one mention of Gehenom, okay, which we'll get to in a second. But the Rambam certainly, if you compare his treatment of Olam Haba to his treatment of Gehenom, Olam Haba, he talks about a lot. He devotes lots of space to it. Gehenom, barely any mention. It's tucked away. It's not in the Mishnah Torah at all. Okay, and there is a controversy. Did the Rambam hold by Gehenom? Okay, now, I think it is obvious that the answer is absolutely not. Okay, the Rambam did not hold by Gehenom. And disagreeing with that is the Ramban, who says the Ramban did hold by Gehenom, and the Ramban in the Shar HaGamul goes through and brings proofs to try to like show how the Rambam really does hold by Gehenom. I don't mean to pit myself against the Ramban. There are many others who also hold that the Rambam didn't hold by Gehenom. I'm just gonna, in order to sidestep this controversy, I just want to read a footnote from Menachem Kellner's book, Must a Jew Believe Everything, in Appendix A, page 154, footnote 12, where he just summarizes and has a nod to this. And this is expressing why I side with this view. Kellner says, a consequence of Maimonides' position, a consequence from which he does not shrink, is that there is no actual punishment after death. Now, when he says no actual punishment, he says kares is the punishment, which we'll define in a second. He makes that point tolerably clear in his discussion of the biblical kares, cutting off, in the Laws of Repentance 1:1 and 1:5, and explicitly in 8:1, which we just read. His statements on this matter have deeply troubled traditionalist interpreters of the Mishnah Torah, starting with Nachmanides and continuing through Rav Yosef Karo in his Kesef Mishnah to the Laws of Repentance 8:1, to our own day in the commentaries of Rabbi Nachman Rabinovich and Rabbi Yosef Kafich. Okay, the ingenuity of these commentators aside, it will be shown that Maimonides could not have held any other position. Okay, and what I hope to show as we go through these sources is it's not up for debate whether the Rambam held by Gehenom. You can bring me all of the allusions you want in the Rambam's text. Rambam does not have a metaphysical mechanism by which there can possibly be a Gehenom. Okay, and I'll explain what that means. And I'm trying to stress this because there's certain machlok, certain times you have, the majority of time you have a machlokas, a disagreement, and like each side could theoretically have held by the other. Sometimes though you get fundamental ones where it is impossible for one side to hold like the other, and this is one of these cases here. Okay, so let me just show you before we talk about why the Rambam can't hold by that Gehenom and what his Olam Haba is. Here's the one place where the Rambam does mention Gehenom. It's in the introduction to Perek Chelek, and he says, but Gehenom is a term, and this is right after his discussion of Gan Eden, where he says Gan Eden might be a place on earth. This is okay, possible. He says, but Gehenom is a term for the suffering that will overtake the wicked in this world. And the Talmud does not provide a clear description of that suffering. Some say that the sun will come close to them and burn them, meaning burn the wicked, learning from what is written in Malachi 3:19, behold, the day comes burning like a furnace. Others say that a strange heat will be generated in their bodies and burn them, learning from what is written, your breath is a fire that shall devour you, in Yeshayahu 33:11. Okay, now you'll notice, if you can see, if you're hearing, you can't see, but if you can see here, I put in brackets, suffering that will overtake the wicked in this world. How do I know it's in this world? Because these psukim that he quotes are all about the time of Mashiach. Okay, and if you look at the, again, there's been a lot written on this, but if you look at the commentators on the Rambam in this reference, and if you look at the source, which I believe is Reish Lakish in the Gemara, then it seems to refer to an event of punishment in this world at the time of Mashiach, as opposed to a state or a spiritual place of punishment in the afterlife. Okay, so the only mention the Rambam has of Gehenom is that one little paragraph or that one little sentence in the Pirush Mishnayos in the Hakdama of Chelek, where he says it's a bodily punishment that will befall the wicked at a specific point in time in the time of Mashiach, but there is no afterlife punishment called Gehenom, and again, it's just absent from his works. Okay, there's a fake Rambam that does talk about people being punished, and I think that some of the Mefarshim who do try to argue that the Rambam, did believe in Gehenom, I think they thought that was a real Rambam, but it's clear it's not a real Rambam. It's not in the authoritative manuscripts either. So there's no Gehenom here. Okay, just Olam Haba, and the punishment is to not have Olam Haba. So in other words, there's non-existence. You die like an animal. Okay, and then there are varying levels of Olam Haba. So let's just go more into what this Olam Haba is. So the Rambam continues in the 8th parak of Hilchos Tshuva. There are no bodies or physical forms in the world to come, but there are only the souls of the righteous, which are without bodies, like the ministering angels. Since there are no bodies, there is no eating, nor drinking, nor anything that human bodies need in this world, nor can there occur any bodily occurrences that happen in this world, such as sitting, standing, sleep, death, sadness, mirth, and the like. Thus did the early sages say, in the world to come, there is no eating, drinking, or sexual relations. Rather, the righteous sit with their crowns on their heads and derive enjoyment from the radiance of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. Now, we have to explain that because he just said you can't sit in Olam Haba, right? Standing room only, or you can't stand either. But so just to summarize here, there are no physical bodies in the Rambam's Olam Haba, nor are there any physical phenomena, right? So no motions, no emotions, no other things like that. And again, this got the Rambam into a lot of trouble because a lot of people did say, and maybe the majority say, that Olam Haba does refer to a physical reward on this earth, which is synonymous or synchronous with the time of Mashiach. And there is a world of souls where these other Rishonim hold that there's like a waiting room that everyone ultimately comes and gets their ultimate reward in this world. According to the Rambam, the ultimate reward is in Olam Haba, which is completely non-physical. Again, just to mention an amusing reminder of the warning that I gave earlier about letting your imagination get the best of you. So whenever I presented this to my high schoolers, and we were talking about the different views of Olam Haba, and so one time a student asked me, we were talking about the soul, and so she said, she said, I think she had a puppy that died earlier in the year, and so she said, is my puppy going to be in Olam Haba? So I said, well, it depends. All right, according to the Rambam, then puppies can't have Olam Haba, and we'll see why in a little while, because they don't have the type of soul which can gain immortality. According to the Ramban, I said, if your puppy is around at the time when Mashiach comes and you merit to live during the time of Mashiach, then yeah, you can have your puppy. So she said, I believe in the Ramban's view. And I said, the choice of a metaphysical doctrine should not be based on whether there are puppies. Okay, and if you think about the way that a lot of Jews go about making these decisions on these weighty topics, is that's just how they make the decision. Whatever appeals to them and makes them feel, good, that's how they make these decisions. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for understanding the truth and going wherever it takes us. Okay, so but again, people were very upset by the fact that the Rambam's Olam Haba is not physical. All right. So what did the Rambam mean when he said that the righteous sit with their crowns on their heads and derive enjoyment from the radiance of the Shekhinah? So he says, going on in Hilchos Tshuva, it is clear to you that there are no bodies there, since there is no eating and drinking there. Thus, their statement that the righteous sit is an allegory. Its meaning is that the souls of the righteous exist there without toil or exertion. So sitting doesn't require effort. You're just there. So no effort, no exertion. Likewise, their statement, their crowns on their heads, means that the knowledge they know, on account of which they merit life in the world to come, exists with them and is their crown, as Shlomo said, with the crown that his mother crowned him. And it says the eternal joy is on their head, and joy is not a physical entity that can rest upon a head. Thus, the crown mentioned by the sages here is knowledge. Okay, so they have their knowledge, and we're going to delve into this momentarily. The knowledge which they know, on account of which they merit life in the world to come. Okay, that's a key phrase here. Okay, hold on for 1 second. Yeah, Oren?
Does that mean that the only thing which gets you into Olam is the stuff you know and not the things you do?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah. Okay. Good call. That was what I was alluding to there. Yeah. Okay. And what do they mean by derive enjoyment from the radiance of the Shekhinah? Is shiyodin umasigin me'amitas hakadosh baruch hu. They know and apprehend the reality of God, what they couldn't apprehend while in a dark and lowly bodily existence, meaning that there are certain limitations on what we can know while our minds are operating through our bodies. And even Moshe Rabbeinu, couldn't have positive knowledge of God or knowledge of any purely non-physical thing, because we physical beings only know through the use of our senses and our imagination, and our mind operates through that. But when you're in Olam Haba and your soul is no longer bound by the body, then you can know things in a way that you couldn't know while you were in your body. So this is the type of thing I mentioned, by the way, that I have no idea how this works, right? So this is like, what does it mean that your soul is out of your body and knows stuff? What is intellect out of body? That's above my pay grade. Okay, so, but this is just reporting to you what the Rambam is saying here. Okay, and then he ends by saying this, every mention of nefesh in this context of soul does not refer to the neshama, which in the Rambam's lingo means like the vitality. You call it the biological soul, because he holds that the neshama ceases upon death, but the nefesh is what goes on. Okay, and terminology is very tricky in these areas. Even the Rambam agrees that sometimes the terms are interchangeable, but here he's saying that nefesh does not refer to the neshama, which needs the body, but rather the form of the nefesh, which is the knowledge that one has apprehended of the Creator according to its ability, which apprehended abstract concepts and other divine works. This is the form whose character we explain in the 4th chapter of the laws of the foundations of Torah, and that is what is meant by nefesh in this context. And before we analyze this, let's just go back to that reference. Hilchos Yesodei Torah chapter 4, halacha ches, he says, the nefesh of all flesh is the form. Now, I debated whether to go into ideas of form and matter according to Aristotle, which the Rambam uses. That's too far afield. Okay, so we can talk about that later. Okay, I'm planning to give shiur on it this Thursday night. Okay, in a different context. So if you want an actual shiur, then you're welcome to join. The nefesh of all flesh is the form that God gave it. The superior knowledge found in the human nefesh is the form of the man who is perfected in his knowledge. Most confusing sentence in the entire Mishnah Torah, in my opinion. Okay, that I've seen. Concerning this form, the Torah said, "Let us make man in our form, tselem, like our likeness." But here's the takeaway. This means that man should have a form that knows and apprehends immaterial concepts, meaning concepts that are not that are non-physical, such that it comes to resemble them. This pasuk was not said in reference to the visible form of man, namely his mouth, his nose, his cheeks, the rest of his anatomy, for this is called toar. So let me just string these together here and keep your mind on what Oren said, okay, which is that Rambam says here that in Olam Haba, what are you doing? Your soul is gaining knowledge. Sorry, in Olam Haba, how do you get there? It's through the knowledge that your soul knows. What are you doing in Olam Haba? Your soul is apprehending the reality of God. What do we mean by soul? We mean the part of you that apprehends abstract concepts and God's actions or God's works, meaning just to oversimplify here, physics and Torah, okay, metaphysics, also the existences and anything else that God authors, and the part of you that through knowledge comes to resemble the very things that you're apprehending. Okay, so what goes on in Olam Haba, just to summarize here, is the nefesh, the part of you that knows abstract ideas, exists in a blissful, meaning conflict-free state that is pleasant, whatever that pleasantness is, contemplating God in a manner that was impossible while embodied. Yes, Oren.
How can it be possible for the Rambam barometer to get to Olam Haba to be knowledge when he himself holds that God is impossible to understand?
Good question. So the quick answer to that question is that there are two ways we know God, right? There's knowledge of his creations, which gives us a sort of indirect knowledge of the source of those creations. And again, the common analogy here, which obviously, like all analogies, is limited, is if you see a building that has beautiful architecture, you can infer that the one who created it had the chachma of architecture, had that knowledge, whatever that is, and that if that building is perfectly suited to its inhabitants, then there's a knowledge of the purpose of it, so it's an indirect knowledge. And then the Rambam does hold that negative knowledge is knowledge, but that's, again, the whole first chelik of the Mor Nevuchim deals with that. That's also beyond the scope of what we're doing here. But the point that I want to focus on is the other point you made, which is according to the Rambam, then what gets you into Olam Haba is your knowledge. Okay, and the Rambam addresses this, and this is a point that is also subject to debate, because there are other sources where the Rambam indicates that your actions and your knowledge are the basis of the merit of Olam Haba. But I hope to show just by way of conclusion, again, this is lots of arguments going into this, but that when the Rambam holds that actions increase your reward in Olam Haba, it's only because those actions are a means of affecting your soul. The actions themselves don't actually give you reward in Olam Haba. The actions prime your soul or augment your soul or perfect your soul, but it's really the perfection of the knowing part of you that has existence in Olam Haba. So let's now segue into the main course here. In the 9th chapter of Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam is talking about the blessings and curses of the Torah, right? Like we say in the Shema every day. And he says that those are not the ultimate reward. He says his basic explanation is, well, he says it here, he summarizes. Thus, the explanation of the blessings and curses is as follows. If you serve Hashem with joy and keep his way, he will shower upon you these blessings and distance these curses from you, so that you will be free to become wise in Torah and involve yourself in it in order to merit life in the world to come, thereby benefiting you in the world that is entirely good and prolonging your days in the world that is everlasting. Again, you notice here, he also says that the blessings and curses, really the blessings, help you to be free to become wise in Torah and involve yourself in it. And that's what gets you to Olam Haba. It's really the involvement in the knowledge. Okay, then he says, though, consequently, you will merit both worlds. Okay, now this is one of the contraindications here, but he says, you will merit both worlds, a good life in this world, which brings you to life in the world to come. For if one does not acquire wisdom and good deeds here, he will have nothing by which to merit. Okay, as it is stated, for there is neither action nor reckoning nor knowledge nor wisdom in the grave. And that's from Koheles 9:10. So this is where the Rambam definitively states that the only way you can get merit for Olam Haba, that you can get a reward in Olam Haba, is in this world. Okay, but once you are in the grave, then it is impossible to increase your merit. Again, according to the Rambam, there are many who disagree, but that's the disclaimer at the beginning of this year. Rambam says this even clearer in his commentary on 2 Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos. So Pirkei Avos 4:21 in the Rambam's numbering. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Ha'olam hazeh doma lePruzdor, or according to the Rambam's Girsa, Pruzdod. I didn't use the Rambam's here. I don't know what the difference is. This world is like an antechamber, or is how we would say a vestibule before the world to come. Haskin atzmacha b'pruzdor k'dei shetikans l'traklan. Prepare yourself in the antechamber so you may enter the palace. So the Rambam says the metaphor is obvious and its intent well known. For only in this world can we acquire the perfections by which a person merits life in the world to come. And this world is merely a path and a passageway to there. And in the next Mishnah, I'm just going to read the next Mishnah because he kind of flows. In the next Mishnah, he says, a same person, Rabbi Yaakov, an astounding statement. Huhaya Omer, he would say, Yafa sha'a achas b'tshuva umasim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol chai olam haba. Okay, so we talk a big talk about Olam Haba, and Olam Haba, generally speaking, is better. But there's one thing where Olam Haba is infinitely worse, which is Tshuva and Masim Tovim. Okay, he says 1 hour of Tshuva and good deeds in this world is better than the entire life in the world to come. But Yafa sha'achas shel koras ruach b'olam haba mikol chai olam hazeh. Better 1 hour of bliss in this world than all the life in the world to come. So what does the Rambam say here? He says, we have already explained in the 10th chapter of Sanhedrin that there can be no perfection or improvement after death. Okay, and in the Hebrew here, which is a translation of the Arabic, ein achar hamavis shlemus v'lo tosefes v'lo yikneh adam shlemus v'yosif ma'ala ela ba'olam hazeh. There can be no perfection or improvement after death, and that a person can only acquire perfection and increase his level in this world. This is what Shlomo alluded to in his statement, quotes the same pasuk, for there is neither action nor reckoning nor knowledge nor wisdom in the grave where you are going. And then he says, Ela ba'oso matzav sha'adam holech bohu nishar la'olam. Rather, whatever state a person is in when he departs from life, that is where he will remain forever. So the soul, as were, becomes frozen upon death, and that soul is what goes to Olam Haba. You can only improve yourself in this world, which is why, in the sense of improvement, this world is, even a moment in this world where you could do mitzvahs and tshuva is better than all the life in Olam Haba. And just a side point here, presumably, even though the Rambam doesn't say this exactly, this is the Rambam's reason for why Tchias HaMesim exists. Tchias HaMesim being the resurrection of the dead, which is that if you like, why would, so to speak, God pull you out of Olam Haba and re-embodify you in a body, to take you away from like the enjoyment of the radiance of the Shekhinah? Because for tzaddikim who maximized their opportunities to be involved in Torah and Chachma in this world, but were fraught with all sorts of impediments from society and from their own personal troubles, for them, being brought back will give them another opportunity to increase their reward in Olam Haba. And not only will they be brought back, they'll be brought back in the best of all possible worlds, which is the Mashiach society, where they will live for a very long time and have access to all the greatest Chachamim and all the knowledge of God. So that's the one thing that this world has better than it, going for it than the Olam Haba, which is you can increase your level. So let me just summarize I didn't finish reading. I'll summarize and take Meir's question. Rambam says, therefore, it is proper to strive during this short and brief time we have and to only spend it in learning alone. For its law, now he obviously doesn't mean learning alone. Okay, Rambam holds by mitzvos. For its loss is severe and there's no substitute for it, nor can it be regained. Okay. Pause here for a second. Yeah, Meir, what was your question?
Yeah, just curious. There's already a number of slides.
Yeah, I can go back. Yeah. Yes, so that is one of the wisdom and good deeds. He says, Chachma u'masim tiltin, right? So that is one of the indications that make people say, oh, see, the Rambam holds that good actions are part of what merits you life in the world to come. Was that your question, or you had you're going to go?
Yeah, I was curious.
Oh, good. So I'm going to answer that in the next slide. Okay, so in the next slide, in the Mor Nevuchim 354, the Rambam, yes.
You said this loss is severe?
Yeah. Loss of the opportunities in this world. So meaning, oh, correct. Yeah, sorry. Let me see if it makes sense if you make it flow. Yeah. Therefore, it's proper to strive during this bisman hakater v'hamuar hazeh v'lo ha'aviro, not to spend this brief amount of time. Shehefsedo atum, its loss, the loss of this brief amount of time. Yeah. So in the Mor Nevuchim 354, the Rambam is talking about the 4 types of perfection. So perfection of material possessions, perfection of physical strength and health and prowess. 3rd perfection is perfection of midos, which we'll get to in a little while. And 4th perfection is, he says, the 4th kind of perfection is the true perfection of man, the acquisition of intellectual virtues, that is, apprehension of those concepts which lead to truths about metaphysical matters. This is man's ultimate objective. It gives him true human perfection. It belongs to him alone. It gives him immortality. And on its account, he is called man. Now, again, if I were a metaphysician, I would go and explain how exactly that works, like what part of you that gains knowledge goes on, what does it mean for the soul to go on? But we're just going with Rambam's conclusions here. It's the knowledge that you have that goes on. Okay, well, what about Meir's question? What about mitzvos and midos and good actions? So same chapter, the Rambam says, likewise, all these actions prescribed by the Torah, that is the types of service and the character traits which are useful to people in their mutual dealings, all of these may not be compared to this ultimate end and are not equal to it, and are but a means of preparation for this end. Now, I chose what I think was the most concise summary of this. Rambam, again, all throughout the Mor Nevuchim, and especially if you want to look at those who side with the Rambam against those who disagree with him, they explain that in the Rambam's metaphysics, then the only thing that can have eternal existence is something non-physical, and the only part of you that's non-physical is the part of you that knows, that has knowledge of abstract concepts and God's actions and whatever negative knowledge of God is. And therefore, all of the actions that you do and all the mitzvahs that you do are to either directly perfect you by giving you or reinforcing true ideas. So for example, like Shabbos, right? The mitzvah of Shabbos reinforces the idea and prompts you to study the fact that God created the universe and to study the universe. Kriya Shema is reinforcing the idea of God's oneness, etc. Or the mitzvahs are designed to perfect you in terms of the perfection of character or the perfection of society, which contribute to you being able on an individual level to maximize your involvement in knowledge, or on a societal level for Klal Yisrael as a whole or humanity as a whole to be able to involve themselves in knowledge. It's all actions are but a means to giving you true perfection, true human perfection, which is the only thing that can survive in Olam Haba. So, yes.
Yeah, just a question. So why don't you necessarily say that? Why not just say that, what the knowledge is, just say your knowledge will be sufficient for Olam Haba, and you'll just know that, the mitzvahs will help.
Are you asking why does the Rambam have to mention good actions when he was talking about Hilchos Tshuva?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
like,
right.
It seems like little redundant.
Right. So this is a bit of controversy, and I actually don't know what I think about this, which is that there are, if you go through all the sources in the Rambam on this topic, which again, we're not going through here, if you go through all the sources, you'll notice a pattern, which is that the Rambam only emphasizes knowledge in the Mor Nevuchim and is much more explicit about how actions are only a means of giving you the true perfection. And in the Mishnah Torah, then he talks more explicitly about actions. Now, if you look at the Rambam in the Pirush HaMishnayos on Chelek, when he's talking about how you should talk to other people about serving God and reward, he says that you should basically ease people into the idea of what true perfection is and what true service of God is. And you can even put the emphasis on things in a way that leads people to, maybe not perceive things so accurately. Not a lie. There are people who claim that the Rambam lies about things, which I think is like absurd. But in other words, what the Rambam is saying is true from a certain point of view, that doing good actions does give you reward in Olam Haba, but he's just not spelling out in the Mishnah Torah that those good actions give you reward by perfecting your soul. But for the sake of the people who he's writing the Mishnah Torah for, Mishnah Torah he wrote for everybody, is he's promoting the doing of mitzvos in a way that will actually help people to attain reward in Olam Haba. And in the Mor Nevuchim, when he's writing just to his student, and people like his student who are beyond that level where they need to be, they know already that mitzvos are beneficial, but they know that the only basis of immortality is knowledge. So in other words, what I'm essentially answering to you is, in the Mishnah Torah, which is written for everybody, then he is making more explicit the role of good actions in increasing a reward in Olam Haba, and in the Mor Nevuchim, where he doesn't need to be as, he doesn't need to cater to that level in the same way that he focuses on exclusively the mechanisms. That's in the Mishnah Torah, yeah. He does not say that in the Mor Nevuchim, to my knowledge. Oh, right. So there's the Preface was referring to at the end of Makos. There's the Mishnah that says Rabbi Chanan ben Kasha Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Tzakos Es Yisrael L'Fikach Hir B'Lehem Torah Mitzvos. God wanted to make Israel meritorious, and therefore he made an abundance of Torah and mitzvos. And the Rambam there says that what it means is that since there are so many mitzvos, it's impossible that a person won't do at least one of them lishma b'ava, for its own sake, out of love, and by that merit Olam Haba. Now that's a whole can of worms, which Rav Pesach has a very good shiurim on throughout the years. I don't know what the current, I don't know what the most recent shiur is. That is a big problem according to what I'm saying here. It's a big problem according to what I'm saying, because Rav Pesach is pointing out that there, the Rambam makes it sound like you could do one action and get instant Olam Haba, and it's based on the action, So that's I don't have an answer for that question. He does say lishma though, right. And if you learn the Rambam on lishma, I mean, that is the answer is going to be along those lines. That has to do with the orientation of your soul toward its attachment to the truth and to reality. Yeah, Oren?
Does this mean that in theory, somebody could never do a mitzvah in their life and just study philosophy, metaphysics, or whatever, and they'd still get into Olam Haba? So
it's a good question. I did not incorporate this, was it? Right, the non-Jews, right? That there are non-Jews who have a portion of Olam Haba. The short answer to your question is that the whole commentary in the Mor Nevuchim in the Pirush HaMishnayos on Chelek is on the Mishnah that says Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek L'Olam Haba. All of Israel has a portion in the world to come. In fact, if someone get me the kafech on that volume on Nezikin on Pirush HaMishnayos, thank you. I just want to read his exact lashon. All of Israel has a portion in the world to come, and that's where he goes into the 13 Ikkarim. And the Rambam holds that basically these 13 concepts, ideas, ways of thinking are like, so to speak, the minimal threshold of knowledge a person's soul needs to gain eternal existence. And if you understand the Rambam, it's really not even all 13. It's really the first 5, because the first 5 have to do with God. Thank you. But to answer your question, what if a person doesn't do any mitzvos? And again, here we get to another controversial thing in the Rambam. Right after explaining all the 13 Ikkarim, he says, and this is going to open a can of worms also, but we've got cans of worms open all over the place. He says, I've already gone on at length about these matters and have gone out of, deviated from the purpose of my composition. That's not the phrase I wanted. Sorry. This is right after the 13 Ikkarim. When a person has established all of these 13 foundations and his emunah in them is true, and Rambam's definition of emunah in the Moreh Nevuchim 150 means conviction, rational conviction based on your mind that which exists outside of the soul is that which exists in the soul, meaning it's conviction in the reality of what your mind has apprehended. Okay, this does not mean belief. Okay, the Art Scrolls translation of the Animah means if I believe with perfect faith would make Rambam make that face that I made, at the beginning, right? It's faith is belief in something without or in spite of knowledge. Rambam's definition of emunah is belief in something because of knowledge. Okay, it's the opposite of faith. So when a person has true emunah in these, harihu nifnas b'klal Yisrael, he becomes included in Klal Yisrael. Meaning metaphysically, he's included in Klal Yisrael. Halachically, you're included in Klal Yisrael if you were born to a Jewish mother or you convert, but metaphysically. Then we are obligated to love him and have compassion on him and everything else that God commanded us with regarding love and brotherhood. Here's the phrase that addresses your question directly. Even if it's a weird phrase, even if he did what he's able to in terms of transgressions, okay, mahamas ta'avaso v'his gabrus yitzro hara, due to his lusts and the overpowering of his evil inclination. Harehu nenash lefi godol mirio, he is punished in accordance with the godol mirio, the greatness of his rebellion. Mirio, not like how New Yorkers pronounce Mario's name. Okay, v'yesh lo chelek, and he has a portion in olam haba. V'hum li poshti Yisrael, and he is among the sinners of Israel. But when a person is finds these foundations dubious, or however you want to translate yifakfek, then he has left the group of metaphysical Jews, the kafar be'ikar, and has denied the foundation. V'nikra min ba'apikoros v'kotos v'netios, and he's called a heretic and a denier and one who uproots the shoots. V'chova l'sanoso ul'hashmido, and it is an obligation to hate him and to destroy him. Okay, that's another controversy. V'alav hu omer halom esanech Hashem esne. I hate the ones who you hate, Hashem. Okay, so the answer to your question is he's saying, if you have this basic threshold of foundational knowledge, and you sin not out of actual rebellion against God, but out of you're overpowered by your desires, so then you do have a portion in olam haba. You will be punished, meaning that your olam haba will be lacking to the extent of all of your transgressions, because your transgressions affect your soul. But because you have this knowledge, that will be enough to get you into olam haba, and that's how the Rambam holds that these 13 Ikkarim work. And that's why he formulated these 13 Ikkarim, even though no one had systematically done so before him, because he saw people were confused about the fundamental belief of Judaism, like people are confused about the mute button. Mute. Okay, thank you. And people are also trying to draw on this. Isn't that cute? Let's turn off the. Yeah, or whatever. All right. If you wanna draw on it, you can draw. Just don't distract us. Speaking of distraction, the Rambam formulated these Ikkarim because that's the bare minimum that knowledge your soul needs to have existence in olam haba. And even if you didn't do any mitzvos, and even if you did averos out of desire, not rebellion, your soul would have existence in olam haba. And again, that's controversial because we put the emphasis on mitzvos, right? And again, Rambam is not anti-mitzvos. Rambam says mitzvos will give you reward in olam haba, but he holds that the bare minimum is just being a Yisrael metaphysically, and Yisrael metaphysically means people who hold by the 13 Ikkarim. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ari? Sure. Yeah.
And when somebody has what we call a bechira moment,
right.
That's not a moment where he's gaining knowledge or losing knowledge.
Yeah.
So, according to what we're saying, how does that have an effect on
right.
what he is in all knowledge?
So in case the Zoom didn't pick up on that, then the question is, when we say that when people have like a bechira moment, a moment of true free choice, then like a person can merit olam haba in an instant. And that seems to not really be in line with this idea of like an accumulation of the knowledge.
That won't be
right. So that's very connected to what Preface was quoting from the Rambam at the end of Makos, which is that apparently there is a type of, I don't want to call it a backdoor into olam haba, but like a thing where because if you look at that the Rambam, the Gemara quoted by the Rambam in that Mishnah, which I have here now, the Rambam there, and this does go far afield, but I have to just mention it. In Makos, which is after, where's, after Avos? No, it's after Sanhedrin, right? Oh, there we go, yeah. The Rambam says that, Rabbi Hanani ben Tradion says, Ma'ani l'chaya olam haba. So he says, like, am I going to get olam haba, or like, what is my life in olam haba? And he's worried about his portion in olam haba. V'aneha onen, and the answer says, Klum ba'al liyadcha ma'isa. Did any action come by your way? Klomar, ha'im nizdamin l'cha asiyas mitzvah karoi. Did there happen upon you a mitzvah properly? And then he says, Analo, he answered him, that the mitzvah of tzedakah happened upon him in the greatest possible perfection. So there's a certain thing where apparently when you do a mitzvah lishma and your soul engages in the reality of God's will through the following his mitzvah for no reason other than the fact that God commanded it, whatever you hold lishma to be, that can also have an impact in your olam haba in a way that gets you olam haba right away. Now that's in addition to, well, that's the question here is, do you all, yeah, that's the question. So I think the answer is yes, but I'm not holding it, and that's for Preface Shiur. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why is it limited to tzaddikim?
Why is it limited to tzaddikim? Yeah. Right. So.
Unless you are tzaddik,
Right. So I don't also feel qualified to go into that right now. The Rambam does hold Tchias Mesim is only for tzaddikim, but what's less clear is what his definition of tzaddik is there. We know that there's different definitions of tzaddikim and different purposes. Let's say, for example, in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's binary. Either you're tzaddik or you're a rasha, and then, but other times we say tzaddik is like a certain critical level or it's totally relative. I don't know what the Rambam's standards are. And I don't even know of any place where he states what the standards are for Tchias Mesim. Yeah, even in the Mamar Tchias Mesim. Okay. Yes.
Why, for the Meisim Gotham and the role?
Yeah.
Isn't it simple not to that it's a reflection or it's what to lead to the clarity of thought or impacting thinking?
Right.
And it reflects the values.
Right. So Dani's saying good actions do two things. It leads to clarity and perfection, like we've been saying, but it also is an expression of the truth that you know. The dicey aspect of that kind of answer. Yeah. Say again. Right. Right. So Ari's saying the question is, who cares if it's expressed? Either you have the knowledge or not. Now, there does seem to be an idea, let's say, for example, and I don't know whether the Rambam holds by this, the Ramban's idea of what it means to be tested by God, like by Avraham. So obviously God knows everything that's going to happen. So the Ramban's idea is that sometimes a tzaddik will have a certain perfection, but it is not expressed, and God, so to speak, in order to reward him for it, it needs to be enacted. Now, I don't know if that's because there's something that goes on by being a hybrid creature of a non-physical Tzelem Elokim in an animal body, where when you act on your knowledge, then it actually affects the knowledge, or if it just expresses it. I don't know. It's a plausible answer. It's a dicey answer. I just don't know. I don't know enough about it. Yeah, Sean?
Is it possible that that's talking about experiential knowledge? Like in the sense like that when you experience something, it's different than.
Yeah, so I've been down that road also about the question is it possible that it's experiential knowledge? And I don't know what the Rambam holds experiential knowledge is, because at the end of the day, the knowing part of you is non-physical. It's the chelak ha-hogeh or whatever, or the Tzelem Elokim, and experience is part of the physical body. So what is the interface like? And is experiential knowledge itself even knowledge? I don't know. Yeah, I see.
Sometimes a person needs to act in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
So which act they choose will somehow be involved, it's not just an expression of because you need to do something.
Yeah.
You will be doing something that will, I'm not really saying.
I'm not.
Affect knowledge or stem from.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's along the lines of what Dani's saying. It's possible. I just don't know. Okay, so let's. I'm actually gonna just to keep pacing here.
It's not as
Sure.
substance.
Yeah.
Just from the Rambam and the Yam, it would have been much less true when you leave out maximum over. I mean, when speaking to the audience.
Right. If you're talking from the perspective of pure accuracy, correct. Right. But again, it's not an untrue statement, and it's a beneficial statement. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, okay, I'll go one step further here. I didn't incorporate this into the PowerPoint. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, I don't know the exact citation right now, differentiates between two types of beliefs that the Torah promotes. There are beliefs that are what he calls necessary beliefs, which are like you believe it because it's true, right? Like God is one, or like he created the world, right? And then there are beliefs that the Torah promotes because of the effects that they have on society, right? So the example he gives there, he only gives one example, which is that God gets angry with those who violate his will. Now we know that God doesn't actually get angry because God doesn't have emotions, right? Because God's not physical. But the Torah speaks in those terms and doesn't shy away from speaking in anthropomorphisms. We know this. Because if you promote the idea that God gets angry, then people by those who violate his will, people will avoid violating his will, and then you get to the point of maturity where you no longer need that muscle in the same way. So too here, then it is oh, sorry, did I misname the Rambam's categories? I might have misnamed. The Rambam has these two categories of belief. I forgot what he calls each one. But it might be that the Rambam is promoting doing actions because it is true that good actions give you olam haba, even though it's not the action, it's what the action does for you. Okay, so let's move on and try to answer our first question now. Just to sum up what we did, because that was a lot here. Kellner summarizes this very well, and this is what we meant by the Rambam has no mechanism for Gehenom, and this is going to directly answer our question about aliyah of the neshama. Kellner says in that same thing, page 157 to 158, according to Maimonides' theory of the intellect, humans are born with the potential to learn, which they may or may not actualize. And it is this capability and its actualization in which their humanity lies. In slightly more formal terms, we are born with the capacity to know. To the extent that we actualize that capacity by learning truth, we become actual intellects. We have acquired our intellects. If we fail to actualize our intellects, that capacity with which we are born is wasted and nothing survives the death of our bodies. It is important to note here that on the theory of the acquired intellect, the only way to achieve immortality, what Jews call earning a portion in the world to come, is through actually acquiring an intellect by perfecting ourselves intellectually. There is simply no other mechanism available to Maimonides on his own understanding of the nature of human beings. So just to sum it up in one sentence here, Rambam holds that the immortality of the nefesh is a natural result of, not a reward for, a natural result of the intellectual perfection gained while alive. And Chazal have some good metaphors, which I also forgot to quote here. They say that, okay, well, the one that we did quote was, if you prepare yourself in the antechamber, then you can enter into the palace. There are two more. One says that if you prepare food on Erev Shabbos, then you'll have what to eat on Shabbos. The other one says if you prepare food while you're on shore, then you'll have food to eat while you're at sea. Okay, now if you ask someone, if you put up a cholent on Erev Shabbos and you have it on Shabbos day, is that a reward? No, it's a natural result of your actions. If you are preparing to go on a sea voyage and you accidentally put your food in a crate and don't load the crate onto your ship, and you go out to sea and you don't have any food, is that a punishment? No, it's a natural consequence of just not bringing food with you. So here, when you gain knowledge and intellectual perfection and intellectual virtues, that is what gives your soul existence in Olam Haba. And it's not a prize, it's not an artificial thing, it's just a natural result of what you learn here while you're alive. Yeah, Sean?
Okay, so it seems like there's a shift in language though, from knowledge to intellectual perfection.
Yeah.
Does intellectual perfection mean that you have like a certain amount of knowledge that a person can get,
Yeah.
and you get closer and closer to that perfection?
Yeah.
And like it's a cut-off point of knowledge, or is it a person's capacity towards understanding?
Good question. I'm deferring that to the second point where I address it explicitly. Okay. So just to answer the first part of our share now. Okay. The first question. So it is metaphysically impossible, according to the Rambam, for the soul to change after death, as he said many times. Because the only basis of the reward in Olam Haba is gaining knowledge, and you can only gain knowledge while you're here. And the state of the soul can only be affected in Olam Hazeh. Like he says, there's no wisdom, knowledge, reckoning, or doing in the grave where you're going. So the answer to our question about Le'ilui Nishmas is it is impossible for the soul to change after death, and there is no mechanism in the Rambam's metaphysics by which the living can affect the souls of the deceased. Okay, and again, this is according to the Rambam. There are other opinions, right? Now, again, I know many of you know this already, okay, but hopefully having a review of the sources puts it in a more grounded context. And I want to segue now into, unless there are any questions on this, this is just like not a new point here, but I want to go into zechus.
I have a question on the Rambam theory. He references that it's knowledge that the soul wears like a crown while experiencing the totality of God's existence because he no longer has the humanity. That seems very similar to what he says about Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved sort of the epitome of knowledge, and the only thing separating him from God was his human fleshy bit.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is described as being like a quasi-malach while he was alive.
My question is, in the metaphor that he's using of a crown on top of the soul, is he implying that the natural state of the soul is simply existing after death and experiencing the beneficence, and that there's some kind of a hashgacha, that there's an extra added?
Nope, it is
crown?
According to Rambam, Olam Haba is all natural, organic, right? Is that the soul naturally gains knowledge and lasts after death. It's not a reward. It's not an artificial thing that is miraculously given to you by God. Yeah, that's an important point. Okay. Second point, and by the way, these points get shorter as we go. Okay, so no fear. And what time is mincha? Do we know? Okay, it was 12:18. Okay, fine. So I'm gonna aim for 12:18. I'm sure we can finish and then answer questions afterwards. Okay, so Rambam on zechus. Okay, yeah. Again, common phrase, people say that they're doing something in the zechus of so-and-so. So the question is, what would the Rambam hold about what we call vicarious zechus, which by the way, the title credit goes to Dani. I think it's a good title, vicarious zechus. And by vicarious zechus, we mean two things. A living person doing something in the zechus of the deceased, or for the zechus of the deceased, or the zechus of the deceased benefiting those who are alive. Like we talk about the zechus avos, right? Like the avos have merit and that somehow affects us. So again, is it a point system? Spoiler alert, it's not a point system, okay? But what is it, okay? How does it work? So thankfully, the Rambam has a nice little treatise on zechus, but it's very hard to decode, okay? So this is in, So what we have to ask, in order to answer the question about vicarious zechus, we need to ask the question, what is zechus in general? And also the opposite of zechus, which is avon. And the Rambam talks about this in Hilchos Tshuva, chapter 3. Now, again, this should be a whole shiur. There are whole shiurim given on it in TTL. We're just going to pull out what we need from this, okay? Rambam says each and every person has zechuyos and avonos, and I'm no longer going to translate zechuyos. Okay, merit is not a good word, but I just called it that because otherwise people wouldn't know what the shiur is about. So, and avonos will define also. Avonos is the opposite of zechus. People translate it as iniquities. Okay, a term that no one uses in real life other than when they're looking at an art scroll. A person whose zechuyos are greater than his avonos is a tzaddik, and one whose avonos are greater than his zechuyos is a rasha. A person whose zechuyos and avonos are half and half is a benoni. Okay, if you're getting like Yomim Noraim flashes, then that's where this we talk about this. Although curiously, the Rambam is not talking about Rosh Hashanah here. Okay, we're Davka not going to talk about that. The same is true for the society, the Medina, however you want to translate Medina, country, society, province. If the zechuyos of its inhabitants are more than their avonos, it is righteous. If its avonos are more, it is evil. The same is true for the entire world. So these zechuyos have an effect on the individual, the society, and the world. A person whose avonos exceed his zechuyos immediately dies in his wickedness, as it is stated, because of the abundance of your avon. The same is true for society. If the avonos of its inhabitants are more numerous, it will immediately be destroyed, as it is stated. And the cry of Sodom and Amorah was great. There are tons of questions you can ask on all of this. It was not immediate, same thing with this one. The same is true for the whole world. If their avonos are more numerous, they will be destroyed, as it is stated. And Hashem saw that the evil of man was great. That's by the flood. God gave him 120 years. It wasn't immediate. You can ask questions like, why do we even have people walking around now? It must be that there are no Rishon, lots of questions on that. We're not doing this. Okay. This weighing of zechuyos and avonos does not go according to their quantity, but according to their degree, their magnitude, godlan. There can be a zechus that is equal to many avonos, as it is stated, because of the fact that he found something good in him. I believe this was Avia ben Yeravam. Yeravam was one of our most evil kings, and Avia was his son. Yeravam blocked the pilgrimage paths to the Beis Mikdash, and Avia was a bad guy, but he removed the roadblocks, I believe, and because of that, then he had a zechus that he got buried. He didn't just like get thrown on the field like open dung, unless I'm getting this mixed up with someone else. I think that's it. Fistel will correct me. I know it. And there can be an avon that is equal to many zechuyos, as it is stated, one sinner can destroy much good. The weighing is only done in the mind of the God of Deos. Okay, I'm saying mind in quotation marks because God's mind and essence are not separated. And I don't know how the Rambam translates the God of Deos. Deos in Rambam lingo means character traits, but Deos also means knowledge. I think it's up to debate how you translate this, how you learn the pasuk where this is based on, which we actually read on Haftarah and Rosh Hashanah, I believe. Only God can weigh zechus and avonos. And the last thing is anyone who regrets the mitzvahs he has done and gives up hope on the zechus and says in his heart, what benefit did I get from doing them? I shouldn't have done them. Such a person loses all of them. And no zechus will be mentioned on his behalf. As it is stated, the righteousness of the tzaddik will not save him on the day of his rebellious sin. This only applies to someone who regrets his earlier actions. So what the Rambam has given us in terms of our question is a bunch of clues. Okay, so our question was, what are zechus and avonos? Clues are, every person has them. Okay, clue number 2, they determine the fate of individuals, societies, and the world in some way. Clue number 3, they're weighed based on magnitude, not quantity. 4, only Hashem can weigh them. 5, if you regret your zechus, you lose them. Okay, and 6 is, he just alluded to the mitzvos thing. Mitzvos are a source of zechus, meaning you do mitzvos and that results in zechus. And then he didn't say it in what we read, but elsewhere in Hilchos Tshuva, averos, transgressions, are the source of avonos. Okay, so the question is, what is he talking about? All right, now I'm going to quote a non-Rambam source here just because it is a linguistic thing. And I don't, if the Rambam wrote a Sefer HaSharashim, then I would quote that, but he didn't. So the Radak, who is a Maimonidean, he's in the club, okay, he's got a card, says that the shoresh of avon is avas, ayin vav tav. Okay, and the style of the Sefer HaSharashim is he gives examples of its usage, and you kind of have to infer from the examples what the root meaning is. So he gives 3 examples. Yevoshu Zadim ki sheker ivsuni from Tehillim, for they have maligned me with lies. Another pasuk from Koheles, ki mi yuchal l'sakin es asher ivso, who can straighten what he has twisted. And another example from Koheles, v'his avsu anshe hachayil, when the powerful men will stoop. Now again, these are my translations based on my understanding of the psukim in context here. So you've got here maligned, twisted, and stoop. So what would you say the common denominator of those 3 things is? Say again, misshapen, right? Misshapen, crookedness. All Torah's Shorashim dictionary says to be bent or crooked. I like the word distortion or warped. Okay, so distortion. So avon comes from the root of distortion. Okay, in its Tanakh usage. All right, maybe others use it differently. Okay, now zechus, the Radak says, comes from 2 Shorashim which he hold are both the same. Zakach and Zacha, Zayin Chavchaf and Zayin Chafhe, which he says explicitly, those are the same shoresh. Okay, and he gives a bunch of examples, and I only quoted a few of them here. Shemen Zay Zach, pure olive oil. V'hazikosi bevor kapai, I would purify my hands with soap, like cleanse my hands with soap. Zikisi libi, I purified my heart, which is like a reference to tshuva. Rachatzu hizaku, wash yourselves, purify yourselves. And then the last one is an interesting one. It's the only time where you have a word in the entire Tanakh with the Zayin Chaf Chaf explicitly, zechuchis, gold and glass cannot approximate it. So glass is the meaning here. So what would you say is the common denominator here? And if you say purity, pet peeve of mine, I guess my Torah students know this and my English students know this also, I don't like using words that have direct synonyms. So I don't like the word pure here. What word do we usually have for pure in Hebrew? Tahor, right? So can we say something other than pure that is not tahor, just to differentiate it? Clear, right? Okay, clear, right? So zechukis, yeah, zechukis is I think the clearest thing. Okay, so you could define it by the absence of adulterants, which is just a weird way of saying it. Clarity is the positive quality that results, but really it is the removal of these negative things. Okay. So based on this, I'm going to posit something. Just based on the words, I'm going to posit something, and then I'm going to show that I think this is what the Rambam holds. Okay. So what are zechus and avonos according to the Rambam? So I'm going to posit avon is that which distorts our view of reality, and zechus is that which enables us to see reality clearly. Okay. There should be enables us to see reality clearly. Okay. So where do we see this in the Rambam? So in the Shmona Prakim, in the 2nd chapter, the Rambam talks about ma'alos and migraos, and I changed this 5 times to figure out how I want to translate it. To translate it, so ma'alos are virtues or excellences or perfections, and migraos are imperfections, flaws, shortcomings. So keep that fluid in your mind here. He says the virtues are of 2 types: ma'alos midosios, okay, perfections, excellences, virtues of midos, character traits. I translate them as psychological perfections because I think in the Rambam's usage that's more accurate. And intellectual perfections, malos higionios, or rational perfections. And corresponding to them are the two categories of imperfections. Now he gives a couple examples. Intellectual virtues belong to the rational faculty and include wisdom, i.e. knowing the remote and immediate causes of things after first recognizing the existence of the thing that one is investigating. That's what it means to know something, right? To have chachma of something. Intelligence, haskel, which includes the theoretical intellect that we have by nature, i.e. muskalim rishonim, first innate concepts, right? There's certain innate ideas in the soul. How do we get those? Ask Socrates and Aristotle. They have machlokes on that too, as well as the acquired intellect, meaning what we gain through knowledge, although this is not the place to discuss that. Another intellectual virtue is zechus v'tuv ha'havana, clarity and excellence in comprehension, i.e. the ability to grasp everything instantaneously or in very little time. And the imperfections in this category are the opposites of these things. Okay, I'll summarize after. But the psychological perfections are found only in the emotions and the psyche. Okay, the chelak hamisorer, which the Rambam in the first parak of Shemona Parakim goes through the parts of the soul. So he has the part of you that, we don't have a good word for it in English, the emotive part of the soul, emotive in the sense that it has emotions and it moves you to do things. We call it the psyche. I think that's in our lingo here. And these are served by the senses. There are many perfections in this capacity, including temperance, that's translated precious. Actually, I owe someone else that. Precious people translate as abstinence, which has a very like Catholic connotation. Temperance is like restraining your desires in all areas. Generosity, nadivus, tzedek, righteousness, metinus, patience, anava, humility, ayin tova, magnanimity, ometz, courage, morech, sensitivity, literally softness, and others. And the imperfections of this capacity consist in a deficiency or excess of these. Okay, so character trait perfections and imperfections. Okay, then here's where we get, so very nice, Rambam. What does this have to do with what we're doing? So in the 7th chapter, he says like this, also in Shemona Parakim. He gives the mashal of the veils, okay, the metaphor of the veils. In many places in the Midrash and the Agada, including some passages quoted in the Talmud, it is stated that there are prophets who see Hashem, meaning they know Hashem from behind many veils, and others who see him from behind fewer veils. The difference depends on the extent of their closeness to God and the elevated level of their prophecy. Thus, it is said that Moshe Rabbeinu saw God from behind one clear and shining, i.e. transparent veil. This is what Moshe meant by the expression, this is what is meant by the expression that he, Moshe, looked through the brilliant looking glass. The term looking glass refers to a lens made from a shining material like diamond or glass, so transparent. Okay, then he says the point. The intent of this statement is that, as explained in chapter 2, there are intellectual perfections and psychological perfections. Conversely, there are intellectual imperfections, for example, foolishness, naivete, difficulty in understanding, and psychological imperfections, for example, gluttony, pride, anger, wrath, brashness, and the love of money and the like. Indeed, there are many of these, and we have mentioned the way to distinguish them in chapter 4. All these imperfections are the veils that separate between man and Hashem, may he be exalted as he. This was alluded to in the prophet's statement, it is your avonos that separate between you and your God. Your avonos, namely those aforementioned evils, are the veils that separate between us and him. So here the Rambam is giving us the recipe. He's saying that the veils that separate you, between you and God, are imperfections of intellect and imperfections of character. And avonos are and therefore we can infer that the zechuyos, which are the opposite of avonos, are things that grant you clearer perception of God and again, of reality here, okay? And so that's where I'm getting this idea from, that the zechuyos are really these positive qualities that lead to zechus, to clarity in your understanding. And when I say of God, I mean knowledge of God, knowledge of reality, the ultimate reality being God. But we gain knowledge of God through knowledge of Torah, through knowledge of science, through knowledge of all real things. So I mean clarity per se, but ultimately leading to knowledge of God. I'll summarize in a second. I mentioned that there were 3 levels of perfection, and we talked before about the question of what do actions have to do with your knowledge and what do midos have to do with your knowledge. So in the Moreh Nevuchim 354, the Rambam says the 3rd kind of perfection is more closely connected with man himself than the 2nd perfection. 2nd perfection being perfection of body. It includes perfection of good midos, the highest degree of excellence in man's character. Most of the mitzvos aim at producing this perfection, but even this kind is only a preparation for another perfection and is not sought for its own sake. What is that other perfection? He says, for all midos perfections concern the relation of, sorry, he didn't get to it yet. All midos perfections concern the relation of man to his neighbor. The perfection of man's moral principles is, as it were, given to man for the benefit of mankind. Imagine a person being alone and having no connection whatsoever with any other person. All his good moral principles are at rest. They are not required and give man no perfection whatsoever. These midos are only necessary and useful when man comes in contact with others. Whereas the fourth kind of perfection is the true perfection of man, the acquisition of intellectual virtues, that is, apprehension of those concepts which lead to truths about metaphysical matters. This is man's ultimate objective. It gives him true human perfection. It belongs to him alone. It gives him immortality, and on account of this, he is called man. Now, let me summarize and then answer Sean's question. Okay, sorry. Before we summarize, let's exemplify. Okay, Rambam listed some examples of intellectual perfections: wisdom, intelligence, clarity, quickness of comprehension. I don't think we need to explain how those give you clarity. Like, that is literally what gives you clarity of sight. What we do need to explain is temperance, generosity, righteousness, patience, humility, magnanimity, courage, and sensitivity, right? So how do those give you clear insight into reality? So you'll find that they fall broadly into two categories. One is that emotions that are extreme cloud your actual perception of reality. And the clearest examples are anger and haughtiness, where if you are angry, you cannot think straight. If you're haughty, your view of your own place in the universe is exaggerated. So those are directly tied to your knowledge. Other midos, and I think the Rambam would say that those are useful even if you are on a desert island. Okay, how we reconcile that with his words is a different question. Then there are other things like generosity, or sensitivity to other people. Those are not useful in terms of giving you direct clarity, but they help your interpersonal reactions and ultimately society to create a society where we can all engage in the mutual pursuit of the good, which ultimately is going to be pursuit of knowledge. So they're instrumental in creating a society of clarity, even though on an individual level, you can be very, stingy and have accurate knowledge of physics. Okay. Similarly in avonos, I guess I should just put this up here also, right? You can be stingy and have accurate knowledge of physics, but you can't be ignorant and have accurate knowledge of physics. That's a direct contradiction. Yeah, Oren?
You're saying that generosity is good because it enables society to better understand God.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reason within this system to care about how other people do in their understanding of humanity?
Yeah, so there's a selfish Mishlaic reason, which is that the more people you help to gain knowledge, and the more you promote society gaining knowledge as a whole, the more knowledge you will get as a part of that system. There also arguably is a truth value in recognizing other people as human beings and as fellow Tzelem Elohim. I mean, obviously there's value. I'm not saying arguably like, oh, you don't have to recognize people. I'm saying that there's you could say that it's an intellectual perfection to recognize the equality of your fellow human being, that you're recognizing them as a Tzelem Elohim, and that is an intellectual perfection. I think that's also up for debate. That depends on how you view the role of justice and the basis of justice in intellectual perfection. Is justice just an ethical perfection / societal, or is it intellectual perfection also? I think that's also machlokes. So to summarize and then to answer Sean's question, okay? So according to the Rambam, avon is that which distorts our view of reality, and a zechus is that which enables us to see reality clearly. And specifically, zechus and avonos refer to intellectual and psychological perfections and imperfections. Now, Sean asked, when we say that you get to Olam Haba through your intellect, is it specific ideas and knowledge, or is it intellectual virtues and perfections? Is it like the orientation of your mind towards truth seeking and towards God, or is it specific ideas? Okay. Now, the Rambam, if you'll notice in our sources, uses both terminologies. Like in the Mor Nevuchim and in the Mishnah Torah, he seemed to say it was much more the particular forms that you grasp. And here he explicitly said it was the intellectual virtues, that is the apprehension of those concepts which lead to those truths. And then all the examples he gave were of intellectual perfections, of chachma, seichel, patience in thinking, etc. So which one is it? Okay. So again, big debate. Okay. I think, and this is just me, okay, for whatever that's worth, I think it is more about orienting your soul towards the pursuit of truth than specific ideas. And the reason why I think that is because, number one, I'm a little suspect of what the Rambam's Aristotelian view of knowledge, how tied that was to the idea that there are objective ideas existing in the universe. that like if your mind links with those and they become merged, and that's how you get. I think that's an Aristotelian idea that is suspect in my mind. Whereas, and also you see how much of physics is outdated. I mean, at the Rambam's time, Aristotle had reigned supreme for like 1400 years, 1500 years or whatever. And there's reason to believe that just like we hold that there are laws of nature, and that's just a basic premise of the scientific approach, so too Aristotelian forms are just a law of nature. And so, but we see how every generation that goes by, our knowledge of science is continually like, you know, we're casting off old models and embracing models that are closer to the truth. And you know, all of the particular ideas that the ancients had are false, you know, about physics. What, you're gonna say that Avram didn't get Olam Haba and that Ram didn't have Olam Haba? You're gonna say that the only people who get Olam Haba are people who get the ultimate truth? Is that even possible? So I think from a like reasonable standpoint, I think it makes much more sense to say that your intellectual perfection is not the particular ideas you have, but your soul's orientation towards the truth, which you get through pursuing accurate ideas according to your capacity and understanding, you know? And I think that also, like, I don't know about you, it gives me a little sigh of relief, okay? Because the thought of, you know, there's another source in the Rambam where he says very in an Aristotelian way, you know, perfection consists in knowing every single idea that it is possible to know, you know, and that's a tall order, you know. It's also a tall order to perfect your intellect, but I think that it is because, you know, we know more than Aristotle did the vastness of knowledge, and the proof of that is he thought that he pretty much covered it, you know. But it is a daunting thing to say, like, yeah, your Olam Haba is determined by just how many absolutely true ideas you get, like. From a purely emotional standpoint, like, I think there is a comfort, and again, we shouldn't make decisions based on comfort, but it is more comforting to say that what our primary responsibility is to do here is to cultivate our mind as truth-seeking intellects and to create a society of truth seekers. And that's really what gives the soul existence, not particular formulations of ideas, you know, like as Aristotle might have thought. Yeah. So, answer to our question. So this shouldn't surprise you. It's impossible for the living to give zechus to the dead. Now that we know what zechus is perfection of the soul. And just like I can't learn for you, right? And I can help you learn if I'm interacting with you, but I can't just like sit here and then like transfer points of learning to someone else, you know? Only if I'm interacting with you can my learning and teaching affect your mind. Now, once you have this premise that the soul can't change after death, there's no way that our zechus can affect the zechus that the souls have, okay, after death. It's the same reason why we reject the notion of Ilui Nishmas. However, oh, sorry, oh man, I thought I was rounding up to this. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to show, now we read back in Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam says and uses the word zechus, Shem lo yikne heina chachma u'masim tovim, ein lo b'meh yizkeh. If a person doesn't acquire wisdom and good actions here, he will have nothing by which to merit. Okay, so he's just using that word merit here, okay. And similarly in his commentary on that Mishnah we looked at, he says, Ki ba'olam hazeh niknim hama'alos asher b'hem yizkeh ha'adam l'chai olam haba. Okay, so you can only get zechus here for olam haba. Okay, but anyway, so it is impossible for the living to give zechus to the dead, but now he's transitioned to the third part, and this is much shorter. It is possible for the dead to grant zechus to the living. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, how so? On to this part. Rambam on L'zecher nishmas. Okay, and these last two parts are a little shorter, so I don't know if we finish by 18, but we'll see. Okay, so how the merit of the deceased can affect the living. So what would the Rambam hold about the phrase zichrono libracha, right? Zal, okay, or zatzal, zecher tzadik libracha. So we know 100% that the Rambam would hold by it because it's an open pasuk in Mishlei. Okay, zecher tzadik libracha v'shem rashaim yirkav. The recollection of the righteous is for a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. Okay, people don't really quote the second half as much as the first half, and they don't use the acronym, but they use the first half. Okay, so this is the source of that phrase. So since this is a Rambam shiur, I wanted to see whether the Rambam, you know, talks about this. And there's a handy tool, which if you want as a PDF, I can send you. I think there's a hard copy in Yeshiva. It's called Hamikra B'Rambam. It's basically an index for where the Rambam quotes any pasuk. So always good if you want a Rambam commentary on something to look it up. So I looked it up this morning. Not that I was preparing shiur last minute, but initially, and I saw 10:7, okay, in Hulin Aleph Beis. And I was like, oh, good. I didn't know that the Rambam commented on the pasuk. So I looked it up, and my first reaction when I saw it was Jesus, because he says Jesus. Okay, it's about Jesus, and he says Shem Rashaim Yerkav, that the name of Rashaim should rot. Okay, so So it's not, he doesn't actually explain the first half of our pasuk, which is unfortunate. So we have to like infer it from what we've learned so far and from Maimonidean commentators. So I figured that we would be sort of out of time here. So I'm not going to go through how we got this interpretation. I gave a shiur on this last year, if you want to listen to it on this pasuk in Mishlei. But I think the pshat is like this. I'll show you from the Rambam who alludes to it. And sorry, hold on. I forgot the order of the thing here. So there is one place where the Rambam does talk about memorializing the dead. Okay, about zecher for tzaddik. Okay, it's in Hilchos Evil, the laws of mourning 4:4. So he's talking about what you do with the burials, and he says, "Umitzayin es hakavaros," we mark graves, meaning like we indicate where someone's buried. Ubonin nefesh al hakever. Now, nefesh here does not mean soul; it means tombstone. I don't know why the word is used for that. I just was informed by somebody who was asking a non-last minute question to this morning. Rav Shechter's book Nefesh HaRav. I didn't know this. I thought it was the soul of the Rav, but apparently Rav Shechter explains in the beginning that it's the nefesh is he's using it in the sense of tombstone. And apparently explains that in the intro, which I think is cool. It's a double meaning. So he says, so why is he naming that book that? Because he says, for ordinary people, we build a tombstone on the grave. V'had tzadikim, but the righteous, in bonim lahem nefesh al kivroseim, we do not build a tombstone on their graves. Divrehem heim zichronon, their words, or you could say their principles, like aseres hadvarim, their words or their principles are their memorials. And we don't go visit the graves. Okay, so he says that their words are their memorials, and that's for tzaddikim. Now, to my knowledge, nowadays, I think we do build tombstones for tzaddikim. Maybe it's like a thing where it would be viewed as disrespectful. Maybe no one wants to say that they're a tzaddik, so don't build a tombstone for me. But based on that, I want to give a shot of this pasuk. So the Rambam says, "Zecher tzaddik livracha." First of all, what is bracha? So Rambam says this pretty much every place where you look at the word bracha. He says it's tosefes tova, an increase of good. Okay, so here on our pasuk he says, "Zecher tzaddik libracha ki tamid yihyeh nosaf inyan hatov v'hashlamaso bezachro." There will always be an increase and a perfection of the good when remembering him. Okay, and I'm going to pair that with another commentary, and then we'll explain. The Meiri says, "V'yesh b'zeh Toris." There's a Torah inside here. I think it's supposed to be lahazkir beito maaseh tzadikim l'tov, to recall in its proper time the actions of the tzaddikim for the good, u'liyachas lehem bracha v'chaim ad ha'olam, and to ascribe to them blessing and life eternally, kedei sheyilmedu hashomim inyanehem, so that those who listen can learn from their characters. So I think pshat of this pasuk is zecher tzaddik livracha. So most mefarshim say it means that when you mention a tzaddik, you bless them, you bless their memory. Okay, I think what it means is the recollection of a tzaddik is for a blessing, meaning it actually benefits you by remembering their actions and their words and their principles. Then you strive to emulate them. You review the things that they taught. You are inspired to carry on their legacy. So it ends up being a bracha for you. Okay, it's more. I think this is more the Rambam's pirish than the Meiri, because the Meiri says you ascribe bracha to them. Exactly. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and again, I forgot at this point what we said for the full pasuk, but there is a Mishlei shiur on it on the Mishlei podcast. So I couldn't find the Rambam saying this, but I found the Avram ben Rambam saying something like this. I gave a shiur on this a couple weeks ago, or parshios ago, by the death of Devorah, the original Devorah. Okay, Vatamas Devorah Menekas Rivka. Devorah, the nursemaid of Rivka, died. Vatikaver mitachas leves el tachas alon vayikra shemo alon bachus. So she died there. The nursemaid of Rivka died there, and she was buried below Beis El under the oak, and he named it the Oak of Weeping. So Avram ben Rambam there says something that I think a lot of people find shocking. If you ask most people, who are named Devorah, who they were named after, they'll probably say the Shofetes, the prophetess. So Avram ben Rambam says that the Torah recounted this in order to indicate Devorah's great righteousness. And he says it's possible that they would visit her grave and daven there, just as Jewish women are named after Devorah for blessing, as we find Devorah was a prophetess. So he holds that Devorah, the prophetess, was named after this Devorah, the nursemaid of Rivka. Okay, but the key here is he's saying that there was a practice of naming people after the righteous for blessing. Okay, and I think This is Avram ben Rambam, so he doesn't mean like a mystical thing that you name someone that and they get blessings. I think he means so that they would learn from her and get these blessings. And in fact, the Malbim has a much longer thing, which we went over in Shiur, but I just want to pull this thing out here. We've heard this, there's this thing that people quote a lot, that misas tzadikim mechaper, right? That the death of tzadikim atones, or mechaperes atones. So that sounds very Christian, right? Like, oh, the death of a righteous person will atone for you. So the Malbim gives a really good explanation along these lines. He says, the death of the righteous atones via the eulogy that is given for them, which reminds us of their merit and causes us to do tshuva. This is why it was said he called its name the oak of weeping. So in other words, Yaakov eulogized Devorah, who was righteous, and also Chazal associate this to the death of Rivka herself, who died shortly before, and some say the death of Leah. By talking about the lives that they lived, then it causes us to remember their merits, their perfections, their things that give them a clear view of reality, and to do tshuva, and that is what atones. So it's not like a thing like you're sitting here waiting for the tzaddik to like the death of the Kohen Gadol in the Yira Miklat, right? Like they said that people would send presents to his mom. Wait, was it to his mom? Oh, sorry. Something about the mother, right? Oh, the mother would send. Oh, yeah, right. Exactly, yeah, right. Yeah, so it's not like a magical thing when the tzaddik dies and everyone just gets free kapara for everybody, but it means that people talk about the tzaddik, and then that allows you to perfect yourself and to get atonement, right? So I think that is, this fits in very well with the Rambam's framework. Again, he doesn't say this per se, but I think he would say that when you remember the righteousness of the deceased, it provides an opportunity for us to increase our zechuyos, our intellectual and psychological perfections, by doing teshuvah and following in their footsteps. And that's what we mean by the zechus avos, that it's not a magical point system where you get grandfathered into the Chase account. I don't know how that works, but where like they had so much merit that it trickles down to like you. No, it's if you follow in the ways of the avos, in their ideas, in their chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat, understood according to the Rambam, then you will increase your merit, and you will become part of the hashgacha of God's providence that extends to them, which will affect your olam haba as well. So the dead can transfer merit to us. We just can't transfer it the other way. Okay. Last point of the shiur, which is a very short point. Yes. So I think, the way we should, are you saying how should we? Right. So I think the way we should relate to it, whether they're a tzaddik or not, it helps if they're a tzaddik, it's a prompt to investigate the life of the deceased. When you say the Rav Zatzal, you don't just say it, you say zichrono tzaddik livracha, and you prime yourself for saying, okay, whatever ideas I hear in the Rav's name, or whatever anecdotes I hear about him, or whatever stories I read about in 70 Conversations with Rav, which you can buy on Amazon for $5.50, good book, then you are saying that I want to use this memory to improve myself to obtain zechus and reward olam haba. Okay, yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to make a joke. That I think I just forgot to put this in the PowerPoint. That the Rav in that book says a good shiur is 70% content and 30% entertainment. So you got to sprinkle with the jokes. But this is not really a joke actually. It's when you say le'ilu nishmas. When people say le'ilu nishmas, I always think, yeah, there's one soul that's being elevated. This guy, like when someone has a shiur for the elevation of someone's soul, it's the elevation of the soul of everyone who's attending the shiur. That's what it means that you're elevating the soul. You're not elevating the soul of the deceased, according to the Rambam's view. Okay, last point, Rambam and kapara for the dead. So what would the Rambam hold about the notion of obtaining kapara for the deceased? So it shouldn't surprise us that Rambam holds it's impossible to change after death, right? So you cannot atone, you can only do tshuva here, you can only get atonement here. And yet, in Hilchos Mamrim, Vav Hey, the Rambam is talking about kibbud av v'em, and he says one is obligated to honor one's father and mother after his death. We'll just say his because that's what he's talking about. How so? If he said something in the name of his father, he shouldn't say, "This is what my father said," "Kach Abba Amar Abba Mari," but rather, "Kach Amar Abba Mari Ani Kaparas Mishkavo." This is what my father and master said. I am the atonement of his bed or resting place. I don't know how to translate mishkav here exactly. Okay. When does this apply? During the 12 months after his death. But after the 12 months, he says, may his memory be for the life in the world to come. Now, again, I'm not going to address the other sheets of the Rambam because I don't understand them. But if you hold by others than the Rambam, it fits beautifully because the soul is around for 12 months after death and it's going up and down, and you can increase the merit and you could give atonement, but then after 12 months, something changes and you could say Kaddish, and there's tons of other statements of Chazal and practices that involve affecting the death, the soul after death. Can't say that for the Rambam. So what does the Rambam do? So this is one right an hour before Shiur. I was looking around, found a Rambam. Oh, sorry, hold it in. I always preempt it. So the question is, according to the Rambam, what does it mean to say about one's father and mother that I am their kapara, and why only during the 12 months? So I found a Rambam on the Mishnah in Nagayim. Now, I don't learn Nagayim or Pirush Mishnayos, but it says in Nagayim, the bright spot in a German, this is talking about diagnosing saras, the bright spot in a Germani, in a German, appears as dull white, and the dull white spot in an Ethiopian appears as bright white. Rabbi Yishmael says, B'nai Yisrael, ani kaparasan, hare hein kishekroa. The children of Israel, may I be an atonement for them, are like boxwood, neither black nor white, but of an intermediate shade. So this is talking about skin color, saras, but he just throws in this parenthetical phrase, ani kaparasan. Okay, so the Rambam there explains, I'm their atonement means ani pidyonam, I am in their stead, like literally their redemption. Okay, not redemption like geula, but like swapping out. Okay, and he says this is an expression that people say out of an abundance of fondness. Okay, merov chiba. When Rabbi Yishmael mentioned the evenness of their appearance, this found great favor in his eyes, and he said, "I am their atonement." I have no idea what the Rambam is talking about or why this would be included in the Mishnah. No concept. But you do see one thing: atonement does not mean atonement according to the Rambam here. It means pidyon, which means replacement or redemption. I am in their place. So now you go back to Hilchos Mamrim, and Rambam would not say that you mention your father and say, I am his atonement. You say, I'm in his place, in place of his bed or resting place, which the Rambam is saying is an expression of endearment or fondness. So what does that mean? And this is just speculation. I don't know this for sure. And in fact, the only person I've ever heard actually use this phrase is Rabbi Zucker in his first Yahrzeit Shiur, when he was giving his Yahrzeit Shiur for his mother. He said, Hari ani kaparas mishkaba. So I emailed him before the Shiur and I said, Rabbi Zucker, what did you mean by that? And he said, I don't remember and I can't find my notes, but I'll get back to you hopefully before Shiur. So if I find out, I'll tell you what his pshat was, because he gave a whole Shiur on this. But I think the only pshat is like this, or the only pshat I have right now. During the 12 months after the death of a parent, the offspring reflect on the fact that they carry on the legacy of their parent. Because the pain is still raw, and you are expressing your fondness for them, but also saying, I am the replacement of their mishkav. I don't know if that means like their lineage or like they died and then I'm now the living person in their place, but it does not mean atonement according to the Rambam. And that's clear from the Mishnah and Nagayim. So let's just summarize and conclude with some takeaways here. So the summary of the whole Shiur is as follows. According to the Rambam, there is nothing the living can do to transfer zechus to the souls of the dead. However, the zechus of the deceased can be transferred to the living, and it's to the extent that we learn from their righteousness and carry on their good legacy, becoming their kapara, becoming their replacement by carrying on the good ideas and values, their zechus will continue to benefit us even after they've left olam hazeh for olam haba. And I think it's an interesting thing. I started off at the beginning warning about making metaphysical conclusions based on emotional security and comfort, which you should not do. But I think that I think people, when it comes to the death of a loved one, they want to benefit their soul in olam haba for many reasons, right? It's a natural desire, and it can feel cold and painful to, according to the Rambam, realize that you can't do that. However, I think there is a certain type of comfort in realizing that they can transfer merit to you, and that the way that you keep them alive and you keep the memorial alive is by reflecting on what they stood for and what you learn from them, and then embodying that and then passing that on to those in your circle and those who you have influence over. And that is them giving us zechus. And that's real. That's not like a fluffy concept. That is literally, you are getting their zechus from them the same way we get the zechus from the avos. And I did not have the fortune to actually meet Dani's mother, but hearing really at the Shiva House is when I most heard you talk about her qualities, and it gave me a picture of the type of person that she was, and just hearing every time you speak about her strength and her resilience. And I think, again, it's my loss that I never got a chance to know her, but I am glad that you have spoken about her and that you have provided this opportunity here to go over these ideas in her zechus. And by in her zechus, we mean, now we can say what we mean by that, in reflecting on who she was when she was alive, and gaining from that as much as we can in terms of how we live our lives. End of shir. Yep. All right, mincha time. Oh, Rechavim. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I got it. Yeah.
You gotta be clear.
Oh, no.